You know that moment when your entire world shifts on its axis, and you realize that everything you thought you knew was a lie? I'm talking about that split second when the ground opens up beneath your feet and you're falling through space, watching your life crumble in slow motion. That's where this story begins, but not really, because the real beginning was months earlier when I should have seen the signs, but was too damn blind with love to notice my name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was married to Sarah for 8 years, and I thought I knew what happiness looked like. I thought I understood what it meant to build a life with someone, to wake up every morning grateful that this beautiful, intelligent woman had chosen me. God, I was so naive. So fucking naive. It started with a phone. Isn't it always the phone? Sarah had always been casual about her device, left it lying around, never minded if I grabbed it to check the weather or look something up. But somewhere, around February, that changed. Suddenly, her phone lived in her purse, or face down on the nightstand, or clutched in her hand like some precious artifact. When it buzzed during dinner, she'd glance at it with this quick, guilty expression before flipping it over and saying it was just work. Work, Jesus Christ, how many times did I hear that word? Just work, honey. Work emergency. You know how demanding my job is? And I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because the alternative was unthinkable. The late nights started around the same time. Sarah worked in marketing for a tech company, and sure, they had deadlines and client presentations, but suddenly she was staying until 9, 10 o'clock multiple nights a week. She'd come home exhausted, claiming she'd grabbed dinner at the office, barely able to keep her eyes open while we watched Netflix. But here's the thing, and this is what kills me. I'd catch her smiling at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. This secret, private smile that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I started paying attention to her routine. Not because I was suspicious at first, but because I was trying to figure out how to reconnect with my wife. She seemed distant, distracted, like she was living in some parallel universe where I was just background noise. When I'd try to touch her, she'd stiffen slightly before relaxing into it, like she had to remind herself to accept my affection. Our sex life, which had never been mind-blowing, but was always comfortable and loving, became perfunctory, scheduled. She'd go through the motions. But I could tell her mind was elsewhere. The worst part was how she'd look at me sometimes, like she was studying me, calculating something. I'd catch her watching me with this expression. I couldn't decode part guilt, part pity, part something else I didn't want to identify. When I'd ask what she was thinking about, she'd shake her head and smile that new smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes, and say, "Nothing, just spacing out." I remember the exact moment I knew something was seriously wrong. It was a Thursday night in March, and I'd gotten home early hoping to surprise her with takeout from her favorite Thai place. She wasn't home yet, which wasn't unusual, but when she walked in at almost 10:30, she looked different. Her hair was slightly messed up, her lipstick gone. And there was this glow about her that I recognized but hadn't seen directed at me in months. She looked like a woman who'd been thoroughly kissed. "Sorry, honey," she said, barely making eye contact as she headed straight for the shower. Crazy day. Janet needed help with the Morrison presentation, and we lost track of time. But Janet was her work friend, and I'd met Janet plenty of times. Janet was married with 3 kids, and about as likely to keep Sarah out until 10:30 as I was to sprout wings and fly. That night, I lay in bed listening to Sarah's breathing, knowing she wasn't asleep either, both of us pretending. The space between us felt like an ocean. I wanted to roll over, to pull her close, to ask her what was happening to us, but I was terrified of the answer. So I did what cowards do. I waited and watched, and hoped I was wrong. The evidence accumulated like snow, small flakes that individually meant nothing, but together created an avalanche of doubt. New underwear, Lacey, expensive stuff I'd never seen before. A sudden interest in yoga classes that met 3 times a week. A haircut that was shorter, more sophisticated, the kind of change a woman makes when she wants to impress someone. She started talking about work colleagues I'd never heard of, dropping names into casual conversation like breadcrumbs. Ooh, Marcus mentioned this great restaurant, or David was telling us about his trip to Portland. Marcus, David, who the fuck were Marcus and David? I became a detective in my own marriage, and I hated every second of it. I'd listen to her phone conversations from the next room, trying to decipher the tone in her voice when she thought I couldn't hear. I'd checked the mileage on her car, calculating whether her claimed destinations matched the distance traveled. I started noticing things like credit card charges at restaurants I'd never been to, gas station purchases in parts of town where she had no business being. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in April. Sarah was in the shower, and her phone was charging on the dresser. It lit up with a text message, and I saw just enough to make my blood freeze. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've been thinking about you all week." The sender was listed as M with a heart, EMOJI. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. I knew her passcode. It was our anniversary date, which now seemed like the cruelest irony. The message thread was devastating. Months of exchanges, each one driving a nail deeper into the coffin of our marriage. "You felt so good last night. I can't concentrate at work thinking about your mouth. When can we get away for a whole weekend?" And Sarah's responses were even worse because they revealed a side of her I'd never seen, passionate and desperate, and completely uninhibited. She was telling this man, Marcus, it turned out, Marcus from her yoga class, things she'd never said to me, describing fantasies and desires that apparently I'd never been able to inspire. The most recent exchange was from the night before. "He's going to his parents tomorrow to drop off the kids. We'll have the whole afternoon. I'll come over after he leaves. God, I need you." I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. The shower was still running. Sarah was humming, actually humming, probably thinking about her afternoon. With Marcus while she washed my touch off her skin, that's when I started planning. I could have confronted her right then. Could have waited in the bedroom with her phone in my hand and watched her face crumble when she realized she'd been caught. But I didn't want drama. I didn't want tears and apologies and promises to change. I wanted the truth, all of it, and I wanted her to reveal herself completely before I decided how to burn it all down. So I played along. When she came out of the shower, I kissed her forehead and asked about her plans for the day. "Oh, just some errands," she said, not meeting. My eyes maybe grab lunch with Lisa. Lisa was her cover story, I realized. Poor, innocent Lisa, unknowingly providing alibis for my wife's affair. "I was thinking of taking the kids to my parents' place," I said casually. "It's been a while since they've seen them, and the weather's supposed to be nice." Sarah's face lit up with genuine pleasure for the first time in weeks. "That sounds perfect. They'll love that." "Yes," I thought, "because it gives you the whole day to fuck your boyfriend." The drive to my parents' house was torture. My kids, Emma, 7, and Jake, 9, were chattering in the back seat about school and friends and the elaborate Lego castle Jake was building, and all I could think about was how their mother was betraying everything we'd built together. How was I going to explain this to them when it all fell apart? How was I going to look at their innocent faces and tell them that Mommy wasn't who we thought she was? I'd planned to stay at my parents' for the day, to give Sarah and Marcus plenty of time to finish their little rendezvous before coming home. But sitting at my mother's kitchen table, forcing conversation about neighborhood gossip and Dad's retirement plans, I felt this overwhelming need to see it for myself, to witness the betrayal firsthand. Maybe I was a masochist, or maybe I just needed concrete evidence that would kill any lingering hope that I was wrong. I told my parents I had forgotten something at home and would be back in a few hours. They were happy to keep the kids longer. They saw their grandchildren so rarely that every extra minute was a gift. If only they knew what gift I was about to give myself, the drive home was surreal. I kept thinking this was all some elaborate misunderstanding, that I'd walk into my house and find Sarah cleaning or reading or doing any of the 1,000 normal things wives do on Saturday afternoons. But as I turned onto my street, I saw that truck parked in front of my house. A blue Ford F-150 that I'd never seen before. Taking up space in front of the home I'd been paying for while its owner fucked my wife inside, I parked 3 houses down and sat there for a moment, listening to my heart hammering against my ribs. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to leave, to drive away and pretend I'd never seen that truck, to preserve whatever delusion I had left. But the broken part of me, the part that needed to know exactly how deep the knife was buried, made me get out of the car. I had my keys, but I didn't want to walk through the front door and announce my presence. Instead, I went around to the basement entrance, a door we rarely used except for bringing in lawn equipment. It opened directly into our unfinished basement. and I knew I could get upstairs without being heard if I was careful. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. There was an energy, a charge in the air that I'd never felt before. It took me a moment to identify it. It was lust, raw and unapologetic, seeping through the floorboards above my head. And then I heard them. Sarah's voice, but not Sarah's. Voice, not the controlled, measured tone I'd grown accustomed to over the past few months. This was primal, desperate, full of need and pleasure and complete abandon. She was making sounds I'd forgotten she was capable of, saying things that made my stomach clench with a mixture of arousal and revulsion. "God, yes," she was gasping. "Right there. Don't stop. Please don't stop." And underneath her voice, a man's deeper tones, speaking to her in ways I'd never heard anyone speak to my wife, commanding her, praising her, treating her like she was the most desirable woman in the world. Which, I realized with a stab of self-loathing, maybe she was just not to me. I should have left then. Any sane man would have walked out that basement door and figured out his next move from the safety of his car. But I was long past sanity. I needed to see them. I needed to watch my marriage die in real time. The basement stairs were old and creaky, but I'd lived in that house for 5 years and knew exactly which boards to avoid. I made my way up slowly, pausing at each step to listen. They were in the living room, which made sense. It had the big, comfortable couch and was far enough from the front, windows that they didn't have to worry about neighbors seeing in. Kitchen was empty when I reached the top of the stairs. I could see through to the living room doorway, but not beyond it. The sounds were louder now, more urgent. Sarah was close to climax. I knew the signs, even if I hadn't witnessed them. In months, I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. My hands were surprisingly steady as I held it around the corner of the kitchen wall, angling it so I could see the couch through the screen. What I saw destroyed me. Sarah was straddling a man I'd never seen before, mid-30s, dark hair, athletic build, everything I wasn't. Her head was thrown back in ecstasy, her beautiful face contorted with pleasure that I hadn't given her in God knows how long. But it wasn't just the physical act that gutted me. It was the way she looked at him, like he was her entire world, like she was completely and utterly consumed by him. This was my wife, the woman who'd promised to love only me, riding another man in our living room with a passion that made our entire sexual history look like a polite handshake. And I was watching it all through my phone screen, recording the death of my marriage in high definition. The man Marcus, I assumed, reached up to cup her face, and she leaned down to kiss him with such tenderness, such intimacy, that I felt something break inside my chest. That kiss was worse than anything else, because it wasn't just physical. It was emotional, loving, the kind of kiss shared between people who genuinely cared about each other. How long had this been going on? How many times had they done this in my house, on my couch, in my bed? How many times had Sarah come home to me with his taste still in her mouth, his scent still on her skin? I kept recording, even as tears blurred my vision. I told myself I needed evidence for the divorce. But really, I think I was punishing myself, forcing myself to watch every agonizing detail. When Sarah finally climaxed, crying out Marcus's name like a prayer, I had to bite my lip to keep from making a sound. They collapsed together afterward. Sarah curled against his chest like she belonged there. They were whispering to each other, intimate conversation I couldn't quite make out, but their body language spoke volumes. This wasn't just sex. This was a relationship. After a few minutes, Sarah sat up and stretched like a satisfied cat. "We should move to the bedroom," she said. "We have time, and I want you to see what I bought for you." Marcus grinned and smacked her ass playfully. "Lead the way, beautiful." They gathered their scattered clothes and headed upstairs, Sarah laughing at something he whispered in her ear. For a moment, watching her genuine happiness, I almost forgot to hate her. She looked so alive, so vibrant, so much like the woman I'd fallen in love with 9 years ago, the woman I'd apparently lost without even realizing it. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close, then crept into the living room. Marcus's jeans were crumpled on the floor next to the couch, and his wallet had fallen out of the back pocket. My hands were shaking again as I opened it and photographed his driver's license, Marcus Chen, 34, with an address across town in the expensive neighborhood near the lake. I also found a business card tucked behind his license. Chen Marketing Solutions. The motherfucker worked in marketing too. That's probably how they met. Some conference or networking event where Sarah was representing her company and Marcus was hunting for new clients. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe they'd just locked eyes across a crowded seminar room and felt that spark that Sarah and I had apparently lost. I took pictures of everything. The license, the business card, even a photo of their daughter he kept in his wallet. A pretty little girl, maybe 5 years old, with Marcus's dark eyes and her mother's smile. He was destroying 2 families, I realized, not just mine. The sounds from upstairs were starting again. Muffled by the bedroom door, but unmistakably passionate. I forced myself to stop listening and focused on the practical details. I had maybe 30 minutes before they finished, which gave me enough time to get back to my car and figure out my next move. But as I was heading toward the basement stairs, I heard my phone buzzing. A text from my mother. The kids are asking, "When you'll be back, Jake wants to show you his new drawing." My children, my innocent, beautiful children, who had no idea their world was about to implode. The thought of them waiting for me, excited to share some little kid artwork, while I stood in my living room processing evidence of their mother's betrayal, was almost too much to bear. I made it to my car before the tears really started. Sitting there in broad daylight, 3 houses down from my own driveway, I cried like I hadn't cried since my father died. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so raw I didn't know it existed. I cried for my marriage, for my children's innocence, for the future I'd planned that would never happen. I cried for the version of myself that had woken up that morning still believing in the woman he'd married. And then, because I'm apparently a glutton for punishment, I watched the video. Seeing it again, on the small screen of my phone, was somehow worse than witnessing it live. The camera had caught details I'd missed in the moment, the way Sarah's wedding ring caught the light as she touched Marcus's chest. The family photos visible in the background while she betrayed everything they represented. I could see our wedding picture on the mantel behind them, Sarah and me on the happiest day of our lives, smiling and naive, and completely unaware that 8 years later she'd be fucking another man 10 feet away from our frozen happiness, have sat there for an hour, alternating between rage and devastation before I finally got my act together enough to drive. I couldn't go back to my parents looking like I'd been crying, so I stopped at a gas station to splash water on my face and buy eye drops. The teenage clerk gave me a concerned look, probably wondering why this middle-aged guy looked like he'd been hit by a truck. The kids were ecstatic when I returned, full of stories about the day's adventures with Grandma and Grandpa. Emma had helped my mother bake cookies, and Jake had indeed finished drawing a picture of our family standing in front of our house, all holding hands under a smiling sun. Looking at it was like being stabbed in the heart. "It's for you." "And Mommy," Jake said proudly, "you can put it on the refrigerator." "It's beautiful, buddy," I managed, ruffling his hair. "Mommy's going to love it." The drive home was torture. The kids chattered in the back seat while I white-knuckled the steering wheel, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to say to Sarah. Part of me wanted to walk in and immediately confront her, to watch her face when she realized I knew everything. But another part of me, the part that was thinking about custody schedules and asset division and how to explain this mess to 2 young children, knew I needed to be smarter about this. Sarah was in the kitchen when we got home, humming. While she prepared dinner, she looked relaxed, satisfied, glowing with the aftermath of good sex. When she saw us, her face lit up with what seemed like genuine pleasure. "How was your day with Grandma and Grandpa?" she asked the kids, swooping Emma up for a hug as they launched into excited recitations of their adventures. Sarah caught my eye over Emma's head and smiled. It was the warmest, most affectionate look she'd given me in months, and I realized with sick certainty that it was guilt-driven. She was being nice to me because she'd spent the afternoon fucking another man. "How was your day?" I asked, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "Oh, quiet," she said with a little shrug. "Ran some errands, did some cleaning. It was nice to have the house to myself for a while." The lie slid off her tongue so easily it was almost impressive. She'd had hours to prepare her story, to craft the perfect deception, and she delivered it without a flicker of conscience. This woman I'd trusted with my heart, my children, the future was lying to my face while our kids hung on her every word. Dinner was surreal. Sarah was more animated than she'd been in weeks, asking the kids detailed questions about their day, laughing at Jake's jokes, complimenting Emma's table, manners. She even flirted with me a little, touching my arm when she asked me to pass the salt, giving me that smile that used to make my knees weak. "You seem happy," I said carefully. "I am," she replied, and for a moment her guard dropped completely. I saw pure, uncomplicated joy in her face, the joy of a woman in love. Just not with me. After dinner, we settled into our usual routine. Kids upstairs for bath time and stories. Sarah and me cleaning up the kitchen together. It should have been comfortable, domestic, the kind of evening that made me grateful for the life we'd built. Instead, I felt like I was acting in a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. "I was thinking," Sarah said as she loaded the dishwasher, "maybe we could plan a little getaway soon, just the two of us. It's been so long since we've had time alone together." The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. Was she planning to leave Marcus? Was this her way of trying to fix our marriage while maintaining her affair? Or was she just trying to assuage her guilt with a romantic weekend that would mean nothing? To her, that sounds nice, I said. Because what else could I say? Where were you thinking? Maybe that bed and breakfast in Mendocino. We always said we'd go back there. Mendocino was where we'd spent our honeymoon. The fact that she could suggest it with a straight face after what I'd witnessed that afternoon told me everything I needed to know about who Sarah had become. That night, after the kids were asleep, Sarah initiated sex for the first time in weeks. She was passionate, aggressive, doing things she hadn't done in months. And as she moved above me in the dark, I couldn't stop thinking about the video on my phone. Couldn't stop seeing her in the exact same position with Marcus just hours earlier. Afterward, as she curled against me with satisfied sighs, I stared at the ceiling and planned my revenge. I spent the next week in a strange state of hyper-awareness, watching Sarah's every move while pretending everything was normal. I started paying closer attention to her schedule, her phone calls, her moods. The pattern became obvious once I knew what to look for. Tuesday and Thursday were yoga nights, which meant Tuesday and Thursday were Marcus nights. She'd come home, energized, glowing, sometimes with her hair still damp from a quick shower. Saturday afternoons were their regular time, when she'd claim errands or lunch with friends, while I was conveniently occupied with kid activities, but they were getting sloppy, or maybe just more comfortable. I caught Sarah texting someone while supposedly helping Emma with homework, smiling at her phone in a way that made my stomach clench. When Emma asked what was funny, Sarah quickly put the phone away and said it was just a silly video from work.Wednesday. Night, I couldn't sleep. I was lying next to my wife, listening to her breathe, wondering how many nights she'd lain in the same spot, thinking about Marcus. Around 2 a.m, I heard her phone buzz on the nightstand. She didn't wake up, but the screen lit up long enough for me to see the preview of a text. "Dreaming about you. Can't wait for Thursday." Thursday, tomorrow, was Thursday, which meant tomorrow was yoga night, which meant tomorrow Sarah would come home with Marcus's touch still on her skin and lie to my face about where she'd been. That's when I decided I was done being passive. I called in sick to work Thursday morning, something I almost never did. Sarah seemed surprised but not suspicious. I'd been acting a little off all week, so my claiming to feel under the weather probably seemed reasonable. "Poor baby," she said, kissing my forehead before leaving for work. "Get some rest. I'll probably be a little late tonight. Yoga class, and then Jess wants to grab dinner after." Jess, another lie. Another fictional alibi. I wondered if Sarah even remembered which friend she was supposed to be with anymore, or if she just cycled through names randomly. After she left, I started preparing. I borrowed a friend's car, telling him mine was in the shop and I needed to run some errands. I drove to Marcus's neighborhood and found his house, a sleek, modern place that probably cost 3 times what mine was worth. His truck was in the driveway, confirming he worked from home at least some of the time. I spent the day conducting surveillance. Like some sort of discount private investigator, Marcus left around noon, came back 2 hours later with grocery bags. He was preparing for Sarah's visit, I realized, buying wine, maybe flowers, setting the stage for their afternoon of betrayal. At 3:30, Sarah's car pulled into his driveway. I watched from across the street as she got out, not looking around, not concerned about being seen. She was carrying a small overnight bag, which explained why her yoga gear always seemed to be in the wash. She wasn't just cheating, she was bringing costumes for her performances. Marcus met her at the door, and even from a distance I could see the way they embraced, long, lingering, the kind of hug shared by people who'd been counting the hours until they could touch again. They disappeared inside, and I sat in my borrowed car feeling like the world's biggest fool. But I wasn't done being a fool yet. Instead of driving away, instead of going home to process what I'd witnessed, I waited. I needed to see how long they spent together. Needed to gather data for the divorce attorney I'd be calling soon. 2.5 hours. That's how long my wife spent in another man's house while I sat outside like a stalker, watching windows for shadows, listening for sounds that would drive me insane. When Sarah finally emerged at 6 o'clock, she looked exactly like she had. That first night, I'd suspected something rumpled, glowing, thoroughly satisfied. She'd probably taken another shower at Marcus's place. But she still had that unmistakable look of a woman who'd been well and truly fucked. I followed her home, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice. She beat me there by 10 minutes, which gave her time to stage her return from yoga and dinner. When I walked in, she was in workout clothes, stretching in the living room with a yoga mat spread on the floor. "Feeling better?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "A little," I said. "How was yoga?" "Good. Challenging. Jess and I tried that new Thai place after the one near the studio. The pad Thai was amazing." Another lie delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd been practicing deception for months. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her, to scream that I knew exactly where she'd been and what she'd been doing. Instead, I nodded and asked if there were leftovers. "Oh, we finished everything," she said quickly. "You know how hungry yoga makes me?" That night, I made a decision. I was done gathering evidence, done playing detective in my own marriage. It was time to take action. I started with the practical stuff, opened a separate bank account, and quietly transferred half our savings. Made copies of all our important documents, mortgage papers, insurance policies, investment statements. Started researching divorce attorneys, reading reviews, figuring out who would fight hardest for my interests. I also started documenting everything, not just Sarah's lies and schedule inconsistencies, but her behavior toward the kids, her contributions to household expenses, her involvement in major decisions. If this was going to get ugly, and I suspected it would, I wanted to be prepared. But most importantly, I started planning how to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. Sarah thought she was clever, thought she'd constructed the perfect deception. She had her cover stories, her alibi friends, her careful schedule that gave her freedom while keeping me clueless. She was living two lives, playing two roles, and she was good enough at it that I might never have caught on if I hadn't come home early that Saturday. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. She thought I was the boring, predictable husband who would never suspect his wife of cheating, who would believe whatever story she told him. She'd forgotten that I was smart, resourceful, and when properly motivated, absolutely ruthless. The plan the first came up with was elegant in its simplicity. I wasn't going to confront Sarah directly, wasn't going to give her the chance to cry and apologize and promise to end the affair. Instead, I was going to let her destroy her own life, and I was going to make sure Marcus went down with her. It took 2 weeks to set everything up, 2 weeks of pretending to be the oblivious husband while I carefully laid the groundwork for their mutual destruction. 2 weeks of watching Sarah lie to my face while I smiled and played along. Knowing that every deception was just adding fuel to the fire I was building, the beauty of my plan was that it used their own behavior against them. They were so comfortable in their affair, so confident in their ability to deceive everyone around them, that they'd gotten careless. And careless cheaters make the most satisfying targets. I started with Marcus's wife. It hadn't been hard to find information about her social media. Makes everyone's life an open book if you know where to look. Jennifer Chen, 32, worked as a nurse at the Children's Hospital. They'd been married 6 years, had that little girl, whose photo I'd seen in Marcus's wallet. From her Facebook page, she seemed like a devoted mother and wife, completely unaware that her husband was fucking my wife every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Jennifer deserved to know the truth. I wanted to tell her in a way that would cause maximum damage to Marcus. So I waited, and watched, and planned. The opportunity came when I noticed Jennifer posting about her work schedule. She was pulling double shifts all week to cover for a colleague who was on vacation, which meant she was leaving the house early. And coming home late, perfect cover for Marcus to bring Sarah over without worrying about being caught. I called Jennifer at the hospital on a Thursday afternoon, right around the time I knew Sarah would be arriving at Marcus's house. "Mrs. Chen, this is going to be hard to hear, but I think you need to know that your husband is having an affair with my wife." The silence that followed was crushing. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her world tilting off its axis, the way mine had a few weeks earlier. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" she finally whispered. "My name is David," I said, using a fake name to protect myself. "I live across the street from your husband. I've been seeing my wife's car in his driveway every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month. I thought you should know. I don't understand. Marcus works from home. He wouldn't. We have a daughter." Her voice was breaking, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I thought about Sarah straddling Marcus on our couch, thought about the months of lies and deception, and my resolve hardened. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know this is devastating, but I have photos if you need proof. Car in the driveway, timestamps, showing when she arrives and leaves. I can email them to you if you want." "Yes," she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear her please. I sent Jennifer the photos from my phone. Nothing explicit, just clear evidence that my wife had been visiting her husband on a regular schedule. I also included Marcus's business card, which I'd photographed from his wallet, so she'd know. I wasn't some random caller making false accusations. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks. They started within an hour. My phone rang, Sarah, calling from Marcus's house, her voice tight with panic. "I need to come straight home," she said. "Something came up at work. Emergency meeting. Emergency meeting." Right, more likely, Marcus's wife had just called him, screaming, and Sarah needed to evacuate before Jennifer showed up with a baseball bat. She got home 20 minutes later, her yoga alibi forgotten in her rush to escape the chaos she'd helped create. She was visibly shaken, jumpy, checking her phone every few minutes like she expected bad news. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Fine," she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "Sorry, just work stress. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I knew exactly how it was because I'd orchestrated the whole thing. Over the next few days, I watched Sarah fall apart. She was constantly on edge, phone always in her hand, jumping every time it rang. She claimed she was coming down with something, and took 2 sick days probably to deal with the fallout from Jennifer's discovery. I pretended not to notice her distress, but internally I was celebrating. This was just phase 1 of my plan, and it was working perfectly. Phase 2 involved Sarah's job. I'd done some research into her company's policies regarding workplace relationships and found exactly what I'd hoped for: a strict code of conduct that prohibited employees from engaging in personal relationships that might compromise professional judgment or create conflicts of interest. The language was deliberately vague, but it covered extramarital affairs that developed through work connections. Marcus's company had done marketing work for Sarah's firm, which is how they'd met. If I could prove their relationship had started as a professional connection that became personal, both of them could face serious consequences at work. It took some digging, but I found what I needed in Sarah's email. She'd been sloppy about separating personal and professional communications, and buried in her work account were messages between her and Marcus that clearly showed their relationship had evolved from business to personal. While they were supposed to be maintaining a professional connection, printed everything: initial project emails, gradually flirtier exchanges, and finally explicit messages that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Then I mailed anonymous packages to both Sarah's HR department and Marcus's business partners. The timing was perfect. Sarah was already reeling from the collapse of her affair, and now she was about to face professional consequences as well. It took a week for the HR investigation to begin, but when it did, it was thorough. Sarah came home one evening looking like she'd been hit by a truck. "They're investigating me," she said, collapsing onto the couch. "Someone sent HR emails between me and a client, claiming I was having an inappropriate relationship." I looked up from my laptop, projecting just the right amount of concern. "What kind of inappropriate relationship?" "It's complicated," she said, not meeting my eyes. "There was this guy, Marcus. His company did some work for us. We became ... friendly. Maybe too friendly. Someone must have misinterpreted our communications." "Friendly." Misinterpreted, the euphemisms were almost insulting. "How friendly?" I asked. Sarah's face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she was going to confess everything, was going to break down and tell me about the affair, give me the chance to comfort her, or rage at her, or at least react honestly to what she'd done. Instead, she pulled herself together and delivered another lie. We exchanged some personal messages, maybe crossed some professional boundaries, but it wasn't anything serious. Someone's trying to make it look worse than it was. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold and trembling. I might lose my job over this, over nothing. Nothing. She was calling the destruction of our marriage nothing. But I played my part, perfectly, squeezing her hand and telling her everything would work out, that HR would see she'd done nothing wrong. All the while, I was thinking about phase 3 of my plan. The investigation dragged on for 2 weeks, during which Sarah became a shadow of herself. She barely ate, barely slept, jumped every time her phone rang. She'd been suspended pending the outcome of the investigation, which meant she was home all day with nothing to do but worry and pace and check her phone obsessively. I almost felt sorry for her almost. Marcus, I learned through some discreet inquiries, was facing his own professional crisis. His business partners had received the same anonymous package, and they were not pleased to discover that their company's reputation was being compromised by an affair with a client. Apparently, they were considering dissolving the partnership entirely. So both Sarah and Marcus were watching their careers implode. Their marriage was in ruins, and they couldn't even comfort each other because Jennifer had kicked Marcus out, and he was living in a motel across town. It was time for the final phase of my plan. I waited until a Thursday, what used to be one of their regular meeting days, to make my move. Sarah was in the kitchen, staring blankly at her laptop screen, probably refreshing her email for updates from HR. She looked defeated, broken, a fraction of the confident woman who'd been cheating on me just a month earlier. "Sarah," sitting down across from her, "we need to talk." Something in my tone made her look up, made her really see me for the first time in weeks. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized that this wasn't going to be another conversation about work stress or career concerns. "I know," I said simply. She opened her mouth, closed it again, opened it once more. No words came out. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together on the table. "I know about Marcus," I continued, my voice calm and steady. "Know about the affair. I know about every Tuesday and Thursday, every Saturday afternoon, every lie you've told me for the past 6 months. David, I recorded you," I said, cutting her off. "That Saturday when I dropped the kids at my parents' and came home early, I saw you with him. I have it all on video." The confession hit her like a physical blow. She actually recoiled, pressing back in her chair like she could escape the truth I was laying out for her. "I know you've been fucking him in our house, in our bed, on our couch. I know you've been using Lisa and Jess as alibis. I know about his business card and his wallet, about the family photos he keeps next to his driver's license. I know about the overnight bag you bring to his house, about the new underwear you bought to impress him." Each detail I revealed made her shrink a little more, until she was practically cowering in her chair. The powerful, confident woman who'd been managing a double life for months had completely disappeared. "I also know," I continued relentlessly, "that you told him things you never told me. That you did things with him you never did with me. That you looked at him the way you used to look at me, back when you actually loved me." Tears were streaming down her face now, but I wasn't finished. "What I don't know," I said, leaning forward, "is why you decided our marriage wasn't worth fighting for. Why you decided I wasn't worth talking to about whatever problems we were having. Why you chose to sneak around and lie instead of just telling me you wanted out." "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We were just working together, and then we started talking. Really talking. And he made me feel ... Feel what?" "Alive," she said, the word coming out like a confession. Like I mattered. Like I was interesting and desirable and worth pursuing. "When was the last time you looked at me like that, David? When was the last time you made me feel like you actually wanted me, not just needed me?" Her words hit harder than I'd expected, because underneath the anger and betrayal, I could hear the truth in what she was saying. We had grown apart over the years, had fallen into routines that prioritized practicality over passion. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to fuck someone else. She flinched at my language, at the cold fury in my voice. It wasn't supposed to go that far, she said. It started as just flirting, just feeling attractive again. But then it became something more, and I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. How long? I asked. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months. Half a year of deception, of coming home to me with his scent on her skin, of kissing me goodnight after spending the afternoon in his bed. And you were never going to tell me? She looked up at me then, her eyes red and swollen, but still beautiful, still capable of breaking my heart even after everything she'd done. I don't know, she said. I thought about it. I thought about leaving, about asking for a divorce. But the kids, and the house, and everything we've built together. I couldn't bear to destroy it all. So you decided to destroy it slowly instead. To let me live a lie while you played house with your boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend, she said, quickly, then caught herself. I mean, it's over. His wife found out, and everything fell apart. I haven't seen him in weeks. I know, I said. I called her. The blood drained from Sarah's face completely. She looked like she might faint. You called Jennifer? I called Jennifer. I also sent your HR department copies of your emails with Marcus. I'm the reason your career is imploding, Sarah. I'm the reason his business partnership is falling apart. I'm the reason both your lives have turned to shit over the past month. She stared at me in horror, seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not the boring, predictable husband she could lie to and manipulate, but someone capable of strategic thinking and calculated revenge. Why? She whispered. Because you destroyed my life first, I said. Because you took everything I believed about us, about our marriage, about the woman I loved, and you burned it all down for 6 months of feeling alive. So I decided to return the favor. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 8 years of marriage settling between us like a death shroud. What happens now? She finally asked. Now you pack a bag and get out of my house, I said. You can stay with your sister, or your mother, or in a motel for all I care, but you're not sleeping under the same roof as my children tonight. David, please, you're not taking the kids, I continued, cutting off her protests. Not until we sort out custody arrangements through lawyers. You want to see Emma and Jake, you can arrange supervised visits through my attorney. You can't keep me from my children. Watch me, I said. I have videos of you fucking another man in there. Home, Sarah. I have emails proving you've been lying to me for months. I have bank records showing you've been spending marital assets on your affair. You really want to take this to court and see how family judges feel about mothers who bring their boyfriends into the family home. She was sobbing now, great heaving, sobs that shook her entire body. A month ago, seeing her cry would have destroyed me. Now I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I never brought him here when the kids were home, she said through her tears. That doesn't make it better, Sarah. That makes it premeditated. I stood up, done with the conversation, done with her tears, done with 8 years of marriage that had apparently meant nothing to her. You have 1 hour to pack whatever you need, I said. I'm picking up the kids from school, and I don't want you here when we get home. They don't need to see their mother crying over the mess she's made. How are you going to explain this to them? For the first time since I'd started talking, my composure cracked slightly, thinking about Emma and Jake, about how this would affect them, about the conversation I'd have to have with them eventually, made my chest tight with grief. I'll figure it out, I said. That's what parents do. We protect our children from adult mistakes. Sarah looked like she wanted to say more, wanted to fight, or plead, or try one more manipulation. But something in my face must have convinced her that I was done being manipulated an hour later. I came home with the kids to find her car gone and a note on the kitchen table. I'm sorry. I love you. I love them. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Emma noticed immediately that something was different. Where's Mommy? She asked, looking around the kitchen like Sarah might be hiding behind the refrigerator. Mommy. Had to go visit Aunt Lisa for a few days, I said, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. She'll call you tonight before bed. It was a temporary explanation, a band-aid on a severed artery, but it bought me time to figure out how to tell 2 young children that their family was falling apart. Jake, who was older and more perceptive, studied my face carefully. "Is Mommy okay?" he asked. "Mommy's fine," I said, pulling him close. Sometimes adults need to work through some problems, but that doesn't change how much we love you. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my living room, the same room where I'd watched my marriage die on my phone screen, and tried to figure out what came next. Sarah called around 9, wanting to talk to the children. I let them each have a few minutes with her, listening to their excited chatter about school and friends and the mundane details of their day. To them, this was just a temporary separation. Mommy on a little trip that would end soon with hugs and kisses and everything back to normal. They had no idea that normal was gone forever. After they hung up, Sarah asked to talk to me. "I found a lawyer," she said, her voice hollow and tired. "He says you can't keep the kids from me indefinitely." "You're right," I said. "Eventually we'll work out a custody arrangement. But until then, they stay with me." "David, I know I hurt. I know I destroyed everything. But please don't punish the children because you're angry at me." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm protecting them. They don't need to be around the chaos you've created right now. When things settle down, when we have a legal framework in place, we'll figure out visitation." "I lost my job," she said quietly. "I'd been expecting this. HR investigations rarely ended well for the employee, especially when there was clear evidence of policy violations." "I'm sorry," I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. Not because I regretted my actions, but because despite everything, I didn't enjoy watching her suffer. "No, you're not," she said, but there was no anger in her voice, just defeat. "You planned this whole thing, didn't you? You wanted to destroy my life the way I destroyed yours." "Yes," I said. There was no point in lying now. "It worked," she said. "I have no job, no husband, limited access to my children, and no relationship with Marcus. Because his wife is divorcing him and taking his daughter across the country, I have nothing left, David. Are you satisfied?" I thought about that question for a long moment. Was I satisfied? Had watching Sarah's life implode given me the closure I'd been seeking? "I'm not satisfied," I said, finally. "I'm just done. I'm done being angry, done wanting revenge, done caring about what happens to you next. I just want to move forward." And I realized, as I said it, that it was true. The rage that had been consuming me for weeks was finally starting to fade, replaced by something that felt almost like peace. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. Sarah got a job at a smaller marketing firm, took a significant pay cut, but managed to rebuild some semblance of stability. We worked out a custody arrangement that gave her every other weekend and 1 night a week with the kids, supervised at first, but gradually transitioning to unsupervised visits as everyone adjusted to the new reality. Marcus disappeared entirely. His business partnership dissolved, his wife took their daughter and moved to Oregon. And from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, he left town soon after. Whether he and Sarah maintained any contact, I never knew and didn't care to find out. The hardest part was helping Emma and Jake understand why their family had changed. We started with simple explanations. Sometimes mommies and daddies can't live together anymore, but they both still love their children very much. As they got older, I gradually gave them more context. Always age-appropriate, always focused on reassurance rather than blame. Emma, being younger, adapted more quickly. Jake struggled more, asked harder questions, occasionally acted out in ways that broke my heart. But kids are resilient, and with time and patience and a lot of family therapy, they both learned to navigate their new reality. I never showed them the video. I never told them the specific details of what their mother had done. That was my burden to carry, not theirs. Sarah and I learned to co-parent civilly, even cordially. We attended school events together, coordinated holiday schedules, presented a united front when the kids needed discipline or support. It wasn't friendship. Too much damage had been done for that, but it was functional, and that was enough. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and dinner conversations, slowly learning to trust again. The woman I eventually got serious with, Lisa, ironically the same name as one of Sarah's fictional alibis, knew the whole story from the beginning. She was patient with my trust issues, understanding about my complicated relationship with my ex-wife, wonderful with my children. We've been together for 3 years now, And last month I asked her to marry me. She said yes, and Emma and Jake are thrilled about having a stepmom who actually wants to be part of their lives. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that Saturday afternoon when I came home early and found Sarah with Marcus. I think about the choice I made to record them instead of confronting them, the choice to seek calculated revenge instead of just walking away. I don't regret it. I know that makes me sound cold, maybe even cruel, but I don't regret destroying their affair or their careers or forcing them to face consequences for their actions. They were living in a fantasy world where they could have everything they wanted without paying any price, and I dragged them back to reality. What I do regret is how long I let myself be blind to what was happening. The signs were all there: the phone secrecy, the late nights, the emotional distance, the way she looked at me like she was calculating something. I ignored it all because I was comfortable, because I didn't want to rock the boat, because I was afraid of what I might find if I looked too closely. But that's a lesson I've learned now. I pay attention to the people in my life, to their moods and behaviors, and the stories they tell me. I trust, but I verify. I love, but I protect myself. The video is still on my phone, buried in a folder I never open. Sometimes I think about deleting it, but something always stops me. Not because I want to relive the pain, but because I need to remember that moment when I chose to fight back instead of just taking whatever cruelty life handed me. I was recording the death of my marriage. But I was also recording the birth of someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be taken advantage of again, someone who knew the difference between love and convenience, between trust and nivety. Sarah destroyed the man who would have forgiven her anything, who would have worked through any problem, who would have spent the rest of his life trying to make her happy, even at the cost of his own happiness. In his place, she created someone harder, smarter, more careful with his heart, I think. In the end, that was probably a fair trade. The kids are doing well. Emma's 11 now, starting to show interest in boys that makes my protective instincts flare. Jake's 13, more serious than he used to be, but still fundamentally kind. Still the sweet boy who drew pictures of our family holding hands under a smiling sun. They see their mother regularly, have built a relationship with her that's separate from the complications of our marriage and divorce. They don't know the full story of why their parents separated, and they may never need to. That's between Sarah and me. A secret will carry forward into whatever futures we build, but sometimes, when I'm tucking Emma into bed, or helping Jake with homework, or just watching them play in the backyard, I'm grateful for the choice I made that day. Not the choice to record Sarah's betrayal, but the choice to fight for what mattered most. I fought for my dignity. I fought for justice. I fought for the right to build a new life on my own terms, rather than accepting whatever scraps of affection Sarah was willing to throw my way. Most importantly, I fought for my children's future, for their right to grow up in a home where love was real and trust was earned and people were held accountable for their actions. Sarah may have shattered our family, but from the pieces I built something stronger, something honest, something worth protecting. And late at night, when I can't sleep, when the memories of that afternoon still creep in to remind me of what I lost, I tell myself that was victory enough. The recording still exists, a digital monument to the day. My old life ended, and my real life began. I'll probably never watch it again, but I'll never delete it either. It's proof that I refuse to be a victim, that when the world tried to break me, I chose to break back, and in the end, that choice made all the difference.